Uh, oh, you meant ready for countdown. Okay, my bad. Okay, just give me a second to get some... Do we have any name incentives actually done, by the way, or...
Hang on.
Okay, if the problems weren't resolved, I'll just name them after a couple of the other runners that I will give a quick shout out over the course of the run. So let me get that inputted. Okay, are you guys ready? Yes. Starting in 3, 2, 1, go. So welcome everybody to Final Fantasy I for the PlayStation Portable. Now I'm gonna focus for the first 45 seconds or something because there's actually like the most technical part of the run right at the start. We're gonna be doing an equipment glitch here which involves quite a lot of precise menuing. So let me make sure I get that right. There we go, that's the worst part out of the way. So basically, right at the start of Final Fantasy I, we're going to be doing an equipment glitch. I bought a hammer, and the PSP version of this game has a little glitch where if you go from a weapon slot into an armor slot, which you can do by basically going into the menu at the same time that you switch characters, you can actually get a completely different item. So I got the hammer. Went into the inventory on the same frame that I switched between characters, because of which I got the ID of the hammer loaded in, but I got it loaded in the armor slot, which corresponds with the idea of the knight's armor, which is the third most expensive piece of armor in the game. So we now have quite some powerful defense right off the bat. A little bit of the story of Final Fantasy. So this game, basically right now, the king has asked us to see if we can go save the princess, who's been captured by the evil knight Garland. We, as the 4 warriors of light, of course, accept this quest from the king, so we're going to go over to Chaos' shrine, which is right over here. It's quite in ruins, it's nothing special, and we're going to fight Garland here. Problem being, I may have some quite powerful armor right now. I do not have any powerful pieces of weapon. So we're going to take a bit of a detour. I got quite unlucky in getting 2 ambushes already on the way. Encounter RNG is one of the main factors that actually slows me down over the course of a run, and ambushes are particularly bad in that. So I'm going to get myself this leather cap, and you might wonder why the hell would you get a leather cap? You know, pretty weak piece of armor, but the leather cap corresponds with the idea of the Judgment Staff, the most powerful staff in the game. Normally gotten in one of the bonus dungeons. It didn't even get introduced until the GBA version of the game. So now I have, you know, some powerful armor. Wow, nice one step, by the way. I got the most powerful staff of the game, and we're going to be moving on to the first boss of the game. So I mean, I guess it's kind of quiet. Otherwise, I would have asked for some silence, because we're going to get up to a very tough boss here. This is Garland. He's quite difficult, as you'll see. So we're just going to attack this guy, because, you know, staffs are really good for attacking. Let's see if we can get him fast. Did not get the 3 hit, but we're going to get the 4 hit. That's the first boss of the game down. So yeah, that was Garland, the first major boss of the game. Really difficult fight, as you can see. So we save the princess, and we're going to go back to the castle, and basically, you know, get some help from the king in our quest. The story goes that, you know, the world, they're kind of in trouble because the light of the 4 crystals has been disappearing. You've got the crystals of earth, fire, water, and air, and, you know, because of that, the land has been rotting, and the seas has been raging, and all that, and, you know, we as the 4 warriors of light have been tasked to stop this. Now, the only way to truly stop this is by gathering the light of the 4 crystals, traveling back 2,000 years into the past and fight Garland, who is actually in the past as well, one more time, and actually, you know, save the world because of that, because you break some time loop. It's kind of complicated. Anyway, as a reward for saving the princess gives us a loot, which is an item I do want to point out we're not going to be seeing it until about, an hour and a half into the run. Hopefully a little bit earlier, like an hour 20. But other than that, it's quite useless. The king, unfortunately, doesn't have any ships for us, because that would be kind of useful, but he is willing to build this bridge, because apparently there are some ships in the town of Provoca. So that's where we're going to go. Gonna quickly wait until these guys are done building this bridge. It takes it's quite a long cutscene. It's one of the longest cutscenes in the game, because the PSP version, aside from being, the only one with quite a game-breaking glitch, is also the version that can actually skip cutscenes. Really useful for a speedrun, honestly. So we're gonna go to the bridge, and wow, we got a nice encounter just before the bridge. This lone wolf trying to stop us in our path. And, well, we get the longest cutscene in the game. This cutscene is about 1.5 minutes long, but because it's the PSP version, we can entirely skip it, so we're just going to move on. So with that, we're going to be moving on to the town of Provoca. And this is quite a long walk, and we're about to come up to a pretty big forest over here. Now, one thing that we know about Final Fantasy is that the amount of encounters you get is also in part determined by what kind of tiles you're on. So forest tiles, for example, will give a significantly higher amount of encounters than, for example, swamp or plains. We'll be using that later on to actually maneuver ourselves in such a way that we avoid as much forest as possible. Unfortunately, that forest we just have to go through. Luckily, we didn't get too unlucky there. This is honestly a pretty good walk to Provoca over here. So we're going to go to Provoca, and I'm going to show you guys the secondary effect of the Judgment Staff, because, I mean, we have some powerful stuff. I already showed off that much. But this gets even better. So this is an actual boss fight. This is the pirates. I'm going to be using the staff as an item, and just wait. Just wait. This animation takes about 8 seconds. Lots of explosions, because explosions are cool. And that's the entire boss fight. That move you just saw was the spell called Flare, which is the most powerful black magic spell in the game. We're about 6 minutes in, we have this third most expensive piece of armor, on our gloves, by the way. I don't know how you carry a piece of armor on your gloves, but sure. We got the most powerful staff in the game, and we have the most powerful black magic spell in the game. I mean, it just goes to show how broken this game is. Anyway, we're going to move out, we're going to get into the ship, and with that we're going to move over to Elfheim, which is the land of the elves. Cool little town. They've got some cool references to, among others, A Link to the Past, or Legend of Zelda. But because this is where you find the grave of Link. We're just gonna go past this town because we don't really care for it yet. There is actually a really important item here, the Mystic Key, which is held by the Elven Prince, and we do need this key. The problem is, the Elven Prince is currently under a sleeping curse, so he's not really able to help us. And the only cure for it is by getting ourselves a Jolt Tonic. Now, this isn't too troublesome because Matoya, who's a witch, she can brew this Jolt Tonic for us, and with that we can wake up the Elven Prince. Problem being that she's currently blind because she's lost her eye. Now, in order to do that, in order to get her eye back, we need to fight the Dark Elf Astos, who's actually the one that put the Elven Prince under a curse, because he is the one true Elven King, or so he says. But in order to attain power, he needs the Mystic Eye from Matoya, as well as a crown. For which we can get, and for that he will fight us over it, and we can then kill him and get the eye, and, get all that in motion. So we need to first get the crown, which is in the Marsh Cave. All of that to get the Mystic Key so that we can go grab the nitro powder so we can blow up a canal so that we can actually go into the rest of the world. Because the sea that our ship is currently in is kind of blocked off from the rest of the world, which is kind of annoying because we can't really get to any of the 4 crystals from here. So we're going to go into the Marsh Cave, pretty easy dungeon. This dungeon specifically has a very low encounter rate, so on average you get anywhere between like 1 or 2 encounters. Sometimes you get none at all, which is what we're ideally hoping for. Sometimes you get like 5 if you get unlucky, which can happen. We've had that happen quite a few times over the course of many a run. We got it. We get our first encounter. And it's an ambush. This is a particularly bad encounter because we're not well suited for this kind of stuff, but we're just gonna have to have them attack, wait it out, and then run away. There is an encounter here. This is a scripted battle. You are always going to get this. This is always going to be either 2 to 4 Pisco Demons. Really difficult encounter casually because they deal a lot of damage, but because of our armor, that doesn't really do much. So we blow them up like any other enemy. And, you know, with that out of the way, we're going to get ourselves this little treasure over here. This is the crown. And we can set our little fetch quest in motion. The first half of, or the first like 20 minutes of the game is basically one giant fetch quest. We get ourselves a second encounter. A Grey Ooze too, which is a particularly rare, or not particularly, it's a fairly rare encounter. One of the other categories, the Full Bestiary category, actually requires you to kill every single encounter in the game. And the Grey Ooze can be quite painful to find, because you can only find it on 2 floors in this dungeon specifically. So, pretty neat little encounter to get. Other than that, we're just going to move out. Hopefully, we'll stay at an average of 1 to 2 encounters. And we do. So we're going to go over to Astos, who is not too far away from here, luckily. It's just a quick side hop. A couple of goblin guards. I've seen a really high number of ambushes today. It's quite bad, but hey. So this is where we could go to the right of the mountains, but that would it would actually be about the same amount of steps. The problem being is that it's a lot of forest to cover, and as I said earlier, forest has a lot of encounters in it, so we're going to avoid that as best we can, which is why we take the left path here. On the way down back, we will take the forest because it saves quite a few steps, but right now it's just not worth it. So we get into the Western Keep, which is where we find the Dark Elf Astos, who's actually disguised himself as, you know, a king, and he calls himself the True Elven King, gets into his true form, and challenges to a battle. Now, this is a fight that actually has a bit of RNG to it. This can either be a 1 or 2 turn fight. On turn 1, he can do one of 2 things. He can either just attack, or he can do a death spell. Death is something that can immediately kill a character, and if that hits one of the mages, it's almost guaranteed to be a 2-turn fight. However, he did a regular attack, which is the best possible RNG. So we're going to blow him up with a couple of Judgment Staffs. We're going to attack with both the Warrior and the Thief because they deal about the same amount of damage either way. The Mages deal significantly more damage with the Judgment Staff. And that gets us enough damage to get a 1-turn here. Pretty quick fight. And that is, well, basically the 4th boss of the game already done. We haven't seen any of the major bosses yet, aside from maybe Garland, but that is basically the 4th boss of the game done. That's how quickly this goes. So we get the Crystal Eye, and with that we're going to move over to Matoya. And this is probably one of the longest segments of just overworld movement that we're going to have to do. First off, we're going to go over to our ship, from which we're going to sail all the way back to the starting town, and then a little bit further even. From there, we're going to go into the cave of Matoya, talk to Matoya, get the Jewel Tonic, and go back to the Elven Castle. So it's quite a bit of backtracking here and there, quite a lot of annoying movement. There's a lot of these enemies, and particularly wolves are really annoying. I should explain that wolves, among other enemies, are particularly difficult to run because of their the way their stat works. So every running calculation is done by looking at your agility, your evasion, and your intelligence, and I might be missing a stat here. And some enemies have that more than others. And currently, because we don't really have any equipment to boost either of those stats, running away can be quite difficult. Now, it does help that, despite the fact that they can be somewhat hard to run, they don't really do any damage. They're not really dangerous in any way, but they can just be a pain in general. It's just what it is, really. A lot of the RNG is either in, you know, how fast you can run from the enemies, as well as how many enemies do you actually get. On an average run, you get about like 170 enemies, roughly, give or take, like a couple dozen. But the main RNG factor is just how quickly can you run from those enemies. Because if you get a lot of wolves, and I have seen a lot of wolves in my days, it can take quite a bit longer than if you get, for example, ogres, which are really easy to run from. We're going to get into our ship, which doesn't mean we're in the clear by any means, because this has these... there's a couple encounters here. Most of them are bad. Buccaneers is actually the best thing you can get. There's these Sahakins, which are basically the wolves of the sea. There's sharks, which are just as painful. There's big eyes, which can paralyze you and are just a giant pain. And then there's the Buccaneers, which is kind of like the cool kid in town. You can just run from them, no problem. So, a little bit more for us, but we're almost in Matoya's cave, so we're almost there. Now we're going to trigger, as soon as we get into the cave, we're going to trigger a cutscene that we could have triggered earlier. We can't actually access this cave right after we get the bridge build. But it's out of the way, we don't really need to. Thus we get into Matoya's cave, and we see her stumbling. She's struggling because she's gone blind, missing her eye. Now you may have noticed as I walked in that there's some brooms walking through this room. We have a little, this is a little thing in the FF1 community. These brooms can actually move during all these cutscenes, and they can actually get specifically into the doorway, which can lose you a whole bunch of time. And a French run of this game, Osabe, he's actually once lost a world record paced run, or actually completely a world record run to the broom. He got about he missed world record by I believe about like 8 seconds or something. And he got, like, the broom got stuck in there for like 20 seconds, and he just couldn't get it out of the way. So those brooms have been particularly bad on some occasions. It's pretty rare to happen. We didn't get all that unlucky. They did not get in my way. These are really bad encounters. I really do not like Sahakin big guys. The gaze can actually paralyze a party member, which is really bad when that happens, because it's just basically a party member that I can't use right now. Okay, we're not running away, so we're gonna just do it like this. This is not how you this is definitely not how you want to be approaching these encounters, but we're just gonna kill them with our judgment staff. Warrior again does not get the ability to run. Everything is gonna go first because they're all faster than me. This is really painful. This is how you can lose giant amounts of time here. But yeah, we just kill off the enemy. We're going to sail over to the Elven Town. Now, once I get into the Elven Town, we are actually going to get equipment that will help me run away. So, you know, after we get through this, they won't be as bad anymore. But the first 16 minutes or so of the game is just basically beat through it. This is still a reasonable pace for a marathon run. Definitely not anything to be ashamed about, so it's all good. So we're going to get into the Elven Castle, we're going to talk to the Elven Prince, get him that Jewel Tonic that we picked up, and finally wake him up so that we can get the Mystic Key. Now, I should say, this Nitro Powder that we want to get so that we can actually blow up that canal was actually in the starting town. The king that we helped at the start could have just given it to us, but he's kind of a greedy king, so he never actually did. So we get the Mystic Key. You know, they're all grateful for our help. We're going to just leave the castle. I'm going to leave it from the side here and immediately re-enter. It actually saves a few steps to do it like that. I'm going to go up here and we're going to go into the treasury. And there's one item in particular that I want to get, which is the first chest over here, the Mithril Hammer, which I'm going to be glitching into the Thieves' Armlets. This is still a frame-perfect trick, and I can't seem to be getting it right. There we go. So we're just going to equip 3 of these things. Each of the Thieves' Armlets gives me a +5 on agility, which basically just ups my running chances very significantly. I will not equip them in the shield slot, mainly because if I happen to try and defend with it in the shield slot, it has a chance of completely hard-locking the game, and we don't want to do that. It tries to call up an animation, and that doesn't exist, so that can be quite troublesome. I'm going to sell my Knight's Armor. That's enough money for the rest of the game. Buy some gold needles, which is just a safety item for later. I hope to not need it, but we might. And we're just going to leave, and we're going to move back to the starting town. And yes, we're actually going to go into the starting town, where we just, well, I mean, this is where we started our game, and this is an item we could have gotten literally 3 minutes into the game if the king had been kind to us, but he wasn't. So, yeah, we're just going to have to deal with it the long way around, I guess. So yeah, in the back of the castle here, you can actually find the castle's treasury. There is one item in particular that I want. There is actually a somewhat newer route, which has a little bit more safety strats. They're about as fast. It doesn't really matter, so we're just not going to do that yet. That gets another item which glitches it into the black robes, black garbs, one of the two. Which can cast Blizzara, which is a bit of a faster animation than the Judgment Staff. It's really seconds it saves at most. And it's only if you get very specific encounters that I'm hoping to just not get in general, because if I don't get it, this ends up being the faster strat. So I can really turn either way. So with the Nitro Powder at hand, Nitro Powder, by the way, basically just being like TNT. We're going to go over to the dwarves, which are in Mount Duragar. We're going to give it to like the head of the dwarves, and he's going to blow up a canal. They've been digging this thing for a while, which would connect the two oceans and make you know, traveling between them a lot more easy. So hopefully that will help us a little bit. That will actually get us the possibility to get to one of the 4 crystals. You can actually, you're kind of allowed to do the crystals in any order you want, except for the first crystal. That always has to be the Crystal of Earth. After that, we can decide how we want to do them. We are going to be doing them in the intended order, because that happens to be the fastest way to do it. In an old route, we actually used to do the Fire Crystal, which is the second crystal, as the last one. But it ended up being a little bit slower, so we don't do that anymore. So yeah, we place the TNT, we blow up that entire thing. How this entire cave does not flood, I do not know. And frankly, like, just call it video game logic, I guess. Because you can see here, you blow up quite a thing. That could...
Sorry. I just want to ask the chat to give a huge clap, a shout out to Crrool and his amazing commentary so far. Unfortunately, the room is empty because it's 4 AM over here, but he definitely deserves some applause. Doing an amazing job all by himself.
Thank you. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that it's 4 AM, but I get it. People need sleep. That's definitely a thing. So yeah, we're gonna just head out. We're gonna go over to that first dungeon where the first crystal, the dungeon where the first crystal is at. Now, you may have noticed I'm still kind of wielding those staffs that I got at the start of the game. I mean, they're really nice staffs, I will say, but they're kind of weak against some of the later bosses, because it is still a staff and they're not really meant to be used by something like a warrior. So I feel like I can get a bit of an equipment upgrade. Now, you may have heard of such swords as, for example, Excalibur. Pretty powerful weapon, honestly, but not powerful enough for me. I'm gonna get the Barbarian Sword, which is 3 times as powerful as the Excalibur. This sword is literally about 3 times as powerful as the next best weapon in the game, on top of which it grants me a strength boost of 15. It's ridiculously overpowered. It's only in the PSP version, so I'm gonna focus for a little bit trying to get this menu done. That's one. I will say, I will also get this on every single character in my party, including the mages, even though they're not really supposed to be carrying swords to begin with. So if you ever wanted to see a mage wield a sword, well, you might be in luck today, because this is the one where that is going to happen. So the Barbarian Sword you can normally only obtain by beating the hardest version of the super boss Crrool, which is in the Labyrinth of Time. It's a PSP unique dungeon that you can only access once you've beaten everything except the last dungeon. You need to do that entire dungeon perfectly. You cannot fail a single of the puzzles, otherwise you are not going to get into the correct version of Crrool. And then you need to actually beat Crrool, which is ridiculously difficult. Like, that boss is like 10 times more powerful than the final boss of the game. He really is the super boss of the game. If you actually do manage to beat him, though, you get the Barbarian Sword as a reward, and it's just a ridiculously overpowered weapon. You'll see as we come up on the next boss of the game, which is on the next floor of the Cavern of Earth. Now, as I head through the Cavern of Earth, you might actually see me make my first safety save in the run, because this dungeon actually contains the first enemy that could potentially kill a run. It's very rare to happen. Although I will say there was recently this tournament happened at this game. You know, basically one of those things that you have for every single game nowadays. And in one of my matches, it was my last match that I played, I actually got killed by that enemy. I ended up losing like 5 minutes. I still got like a half-decent time. I ended in like a 137 or something after losing 5 minutes there, but that just lost me the match, and I lagged behind the entire race as a result. So, you know, we do want to make a safety save here just to ensure that a run can't completely die here. Because in a Final Fantasy game, if you die somewhere, you completely game over. And if you didn't save, you got to start over the entire game. So let's try to not do that. This is also the first floor where you will find unrunnable encounters. So certain enemies in the game are flagged as not being runnable. No matter how hard you try, you will not be able to get away from it. This is kind of unlucky, actually. Whites and ghasts are kind of annoying. But yeah, you may recognize them because we have seen that enemy in the past. Hopefully we'll just not see them because it is really slow if we get them. They will only appear starting floor 3, and they're not that common. We can kill them off fairly easily if we do actually end up encountering them. So I want to show you guys exactly how powerful these bosses are. So keep your eyes closed for this next boss fight. And I guess that I would say that to the audience as well, if there actually was any. But yeah, this is the Vampire, which is the next boss of the game. And this boss, you'll see how powerful these barbarian swords are. So yeah, again, this is an actual boss fight. Do not try to forget that. That was the entire boss. My White Mage, which is, you know, known as the weakest class in the game, literally one-shots him. That's how powerful we are right now. We're going to get the Star Ruby, forgotten by many a runner, and a definite run killer if you do end up forgetting it. That's kind of the reason we got here for now. We're just going to completely backtrack. It turns out if you head a little bit further into the dungeon, there's this stone slab blocking your path. The only way to pass that is by using the Earth Rod. Now, the Earth Rod is held by one of the sages in the Sage's Cave. Problem being that a giant is blocking the path towards the Sage's Cave. And as we all know, giants like rubies because, you know, that's great food. Rubies are great food. This is not good right now. Whites and ghasts are not favoring me. Please do not actually lock me into paralysis here. Okay. My White Mage pulled through. Thank you, White Mage. It can happen that all of my characters get paralyzed, which we call a paralock, which is exactly what happened in that race. Now, the problem with FF1 is that those paralysis, they can actually stack. So you can get completely locked into paralysis and just never break out. It's really annoying when that happens. It's one of the more painful deaths in the game. They can occur. We can work around it to some extent. But I'm just happy that my White Mage got off the Judgment Staff. Otherwise, I probably would have lost a few minutes here. My running does not seem to be lucky today, by the way. I do not seem to be getting the luck. We're getting away, but that's about all there is to say about it. Earlier, when we got the ship, we could have actually gotten an item, the emergency exit, which would instantly have warped me out of this cave. It's a 1 in 6 drop, and for world record attempts, you definitely will want to go for it. It's not necessary to get world record, but it's definitely something that will greatly benefit your odds. Basically, there's this little mini game, and if you get a second place on it, which is beating the mini game between 30 seconds and a minute, so, you know, for speed running, basically at 30 seconds and a little bit, you have a 1 in 6 chance to get an emergency exit. The problem is, it only saves about 2 minutes on average, and it takes about a minute to get, and it's a 1 in 6. So for marathons and races and the likes, it's not at all worth it to go for it. But, you know, if you want to go for world record, it's about 6 minutes into a run, so it's not all bad. So we're coming up on my buddy, this giant over here. He's a really cool dude. He asked for a Star Ruby, and if we have that, well, he lets us pass. So he takes the Star Ruby, he eats the entire thing. Nothing tastier like rubies, and he goes walking off. This is quite a long walking animation. It's one of the longer cutscenes in the game, actually, because we don't really have to do anything. He walks up there. Interestingly enough, he completely disappears from there on, because, you know, there's the stairs here, and then the end of the dungeon. In the older versions of the game, specifically in the PSX version, and I believe also in the NES version of the game, the giant actually just walks into the wall and then completely vanishes, and nobody knows why. It works, I guess. Now, we're coming up on Sage's Cave, and as a general idea for, you know, a bit of a pace, for a marathon or a race, you generally want to get the staff under the 30-minute mark. Looks like we are still getting that, so we're still on a decent pace. For, like, PB attempts and the likes, you want to be getting this at, like, 27, 28 minutes, roughly. So we're a little bit behind that, but still a decent pace for a marathon. We get the Earth Rod, and we're just going to move out. And, well, we're going to go back into Cavern of Earth. We're going to do that dungeon for the 3rd time. This is actually going to be the last time we're going to be doing this. And now actually going for the first crystal of the game. Now again, for the people that just tuned in, I guess I should explain a little bit again. We are basically right now on our quest to collect the 4 crystals of light, the Crystal of Earth being the first one, in order to travel 2,000 years into the past, save the world from Chaos or Garland, who send the 4 fiends into the future, you know, in order to take the light away and block our path, something like that. So, you know, all we need to do is basically just get in there, get through the entire thing, and hopefully finally kill this boss. So, while we're going down here, I'll explain a little bit about the history of this game, because this game has got a pretty decent history. Most of it starting around... I want to say 1.5 to 2 years ago, around the time of the first Final Fantasy Relay, which, I mean, we're currently already, the 3rd one is ongoing as it is, so, you know, but around the first Final Fantasy Relay, Chrono Kirby, who was one of the runners, he was, at first he was a backup runner, and then, you know, he ended up being the runner, so he started more actively running this. And around that time, I came upon FF1 as well, so I joined the community at that time. World record at the time was about a high 137, so like this was, and this had been the world record for about 1.5 years too. So Lenafis, an American runner of this game, he held the record for about 1.5 years at about a high 137. We got into this game, and as we were racing, a lot of races were done in the days, and, you know, kind of trying to get an edge. We'd skip little things, we try to see what kind of things could we potentially do to get a bit of an edge in a race, and a lot of new route changes were thought of in those times. So much so that at some point we literally had a route change basically every single day for like a couple of weeks on end. It was quite crazy. But as we were doing that, we started working around, you know, grinding less, seeing how we could optimize the amount of damage we did. And, you know, as we were going, we kind of were thinking, you know, maybe we could do an all monsters kind of run of this game, which was already done for the NES version. It was a pretty cool run. And we were like, yeah, maybe we could do that. And then we figured out that would require us to do Chronodia, the super boss, 8 times, because there's 8 different bestiary entries for it. So we were like, yeah, that's going to take forever. It actually takes about 11.5 hours to do it, world record being at 11:33:11, I believe. So it would actually end up being quite a long run. So instead, we decided to go for all bosses, which is currently under the 4-hour mark. It's a pretty cool run as well. It requires you to do all of the bonus dungeons, and at that time we figured, hey, at that point we might need to do class changes, which actually added an entire dungeon to the run, which when we were starting to do starting to look at all the options that dungeon gave us, actually ended up being faster than doing it without that dungeon. So even for the any % run, we will be seeing that dungeon later on. We started doing the Citadel of Trials as a completely additional dungeon, but that skips so much grinding. It saves about 6 minutes of grinding, and we get Teleport, which saves a couple of floors, that it actually ended up being faster to do the additional dungeon. But we were still not beating the record. The record was still at a 137 by Lenofis, because we were skipping agility items, and we did not know that that actually helped our running chances. Once we figured that out, world record started to be pushed down very significantly. Chrono Kirby broke the world record, ending in a 127.01 as his lowest time, which is still his PB to date and still one of the top times on the board. Around that time, I managed a little bit after to break the console world record, brought it down to a 135, until we figured out how to get digital download versions working, which cut down on the loading times, bringing that down to like a 130 as well. And the record actually stayed for that for about a year until, or about like, a little bit less. I want to like half a year or something, until the first Final Fantasy tournament came around this time last year, where Oud Sigma, another American runner, actually broke the world record by 4 seconds from 127.05 to 127.01, for which it stayed for another year, which brings us to the current date, which is where the second tournament started very recently. That started in January of this year. After which that got brought back down even further. Anyway, with all that out of the way, we've gotten through the entire dungeon, and we're going to come up on the first really, really big boss of the game, and actually the most difficult boss of the game as well, in terms of, you know, how likely it is that he kills you, which is why we saved in front of him. This is the Lich, the Fiend of Earth, and he has a spell called Blizzara, which instantly wipes my entire party. So yeah, you can immediately hear the music. Pretty tough guy, really strong boss, and that was the Lich, first major boss of the game down. That's all there is to it. This guy actually does have about a 15% chance of killing your party. He needs to outspeed you first and foremost because you kill him in 2 to 3 hits. But if he does outspeed you, he has about a 50% chance to do Blizzara, wipes your entire party, and sets you back to the last save. There are ways to avoid that by getting certain pieces of armor, but it would make us slower, so it's not really worth it. We just take a safety save before him. And with that, we get the light of the first of the 4 crystals. Generally, for, you know, an average run, you want to be around a 35-minute mark. Anywhere between like 32 and 37 is about like where you'd expect to be in a marathon run. So we're somewhat on the slow end of it, but still at a very decent pace. World record attempts will generally be around like 30 to 31 minutes. So we're very significantly below that. That's completely out of the question at this point. We see one of the bonus dungeons unlocked. We'll see 4 of those cutscenes over the course of the run. They are kind of like the only real breaks that you get over the course of this entire game. So they're nice breaks. We get into a shadow encounter. This encounter, by the way, can only be preemptive, which means I can instantly run, or an ambush. It's about an 80% chance to be preemptive, 20% chance to be an ambush, and if you get an ambush, we generally tend to say that this game hates you. In the NES version and PSX version of the game, it's actually more likely that he ambushes you than that it's a preemptive, but they changed that around for the GBA and PSP version of the game, so it actually works in our favor quite nicely. Now with that, we're going to move over to the town of Crescent Lake. We could have already gone to this town way earlier on in the game. We need to go there in order to get the canoe, which is going to unlock several more dungeons that we can go to. The thing is, he will not give us the canoe unless we have at least gotten the light of one of the 4 crystals, the Crystal of Earth. Once we get the canoe, however, we get 3 options. We can either go to the Crystal of Fire in Mount Gulk, which is what the game intends me to do, but we're not actually going to do because it's quite slow. We could go to the Citadel of Trials, which is what the glitchless run of this game actually does. They would go to the Citadel of Trials now, but we're going to go to the Cavern of Ice, which is the most deadly dungeon in this entire game, in any version of the game, pretty much. We're going to do that first because we need to go there in order to get the airship, which is going to make movement significantly faster and actually help us save a little bit of time. We're going to get some ethers. That's going to help me actually get some MP later. For, you know, healing spells and the likes. we're going to get the Mithril Axe, which it's not a very powerful weapon, but as you may have remembered from the earlier menus that we did, we don't really use weapons in the intended way. We use them to glitch armor, which is what we're going to do to boost our agility a little bit further, get our running chances up just a little bit more. Going to talk to the sage and get the canoe, and, well, we're going to move out of town. As I go out of town, I'm going to do an equipment glitch menu to replace the Thieves' Armlets on some of my characters with the Black Garbs, which is going to add 10 additional, or 10 agility per Black Garb over the 5 agility that the Thieves' Armlets have. So it's a nice little agility boost. Okay, that works. So you can't actually get the agility boost on every of the 4 party members. The warrior cannot actually get that. Reason for it being, in order to glitch it, you have to go into the weapon slot, and the Mithril Axe can only be equipped by the warrior. So I have to switch between the warrior and some other character, because of which the warrior is the only one that definitely cannot get it. Depending on how, which route you pick, you can opt to either equip it on 1 or 2 of the 2 mages. 2 is a little bit safer than 1. 1 is a little bit faster than 2, so it kind of ends up evening out. For marathons, I like to equip it on both of them, just to add a little bit more safety for the next few dungeons. With that, we're going to canoe towards the Cavern of Ice. Now, this is the most deadly dungeon in the game. I'll actually be saving several times over the course of this dungeon. Let me try to explain a little bit what this dungeon can do to you. So there's this 1 in 64 encounter. It's a very rare encounter, the White Dragon. Well, it has the move Ice Storm, and it basically instantly kills you. Another runner of this game and a former world record holder of this game, Double Drop, he has been notorious for those for the White Dragons. He's lost so many really good runs to them that we actually ended up calling them the Double Dragons. There is Spectres, Wraiths, Wights, and Ghasts, which can all paralyze me, much like you've seen before. The Cockatrice encounter is in here, which is actually the one encounter that could also kill me in Cavern of Earth, because they have the ability to petrify a party member upon hit. There's the Mind Flayers, which can kill a party member on hit. There is Pisco Demons, which can really just slow you down. Mummies, which can put you to sleep, although they really don't tend to be too scary. But yeah, just lots and lots of things. There's Ice Gigas Winter Wolf. If they ambush you, they actually can kill you as well. There's a 3 in 64, the Dark Wizard, which has Faraga, which can kill you. Basically, just about anything in this place can kill you. Except for maybe Bloodbones. So I'm going to take another safety save here. In one tile, I will get an encounter. This is a spiked tile, which is the first of the spiked tiles that we're going to be seeing over the course of the run. No matter how many times I will step onto that tile, every single time I will step on the tile, I will get into an encounter with Spectres, Wraiths, Wights, Ghasts, and the likes. It's not a... Oh, these are the 1 in 64 White Dragons. Most dangerous encounter in this dungeon. Okay, they did not... If he had done his Ice Storm, I would have been set back. I would have just been killed. I would not have survived that. Luckily, they also give a nice bit of experience, which is nice, I guess. But yeah, that is the rarest encounter in this dungeon, but also the most deadly one. And really one we do not want to see. You can either get 1 or 2 of them, so I even got unlucky in getting 2 of them. But we got away with it. I'm going to heal up both of my mages, and I'm going to save here. You may have noticed I actually kept the health of my Thief and Warrior low, and that has a very particular reason. We're going to come up on the Evil Eye here, which is actually another one of those spike tiles. He's one of those mini-bosses. And we're actually going to kill off 2 of our party members here. Reason being that we're actually going to be doing some grinding. And I know, grinding is boring, and, you know, you don't want to grind because it's a speedrun. But trust me, the grinding isn't all that bad in FF1. This used to be, and I'm saying used to be for a very particular reason, this used to be about an 8-minute grinding section, which is really boring, let's be fair. So we cut that down. We only need to grind up the mages to level 18.5, which takes about a minute and a half. Really, but by the time you've started the grind, it's already almost over. That's how fast this goes. The reason is that we want to get 2 spells. We don't really need experience for, you know, the levels and the likes. We don't need the the additional stats because our equipment is this good. But we do need certain spells, and particularly there's 3 spells I want to get. I want to get Haste, which is a level 4 spell. We could probably already get it as it is. We want to get Healara, which is our heal spell for the last boss. We don't really need it for most of the game, but we will not survive the final boss if we don't have it. And we want to get Teleport, which actually skips a couple of floors later on. Really useful as well. In the old route of the game, we actually used to grind the White Mage up to level 33 in order to get Hilaga, which is a more powerful heal spell. But that became completely redundant when we started doing the Citadel of Trials. Back in those days, we actually used a red mage rather than a black mage. But a red mage doesn't learn teleport at as low a level, so he wasn't particularly useful. You need the class change for teleport as well, so another reason for us to do the Citadel of Trials. That's actually the grind done as it is. So yeah, that was all of the grinding we needed to do. That was literally all the grinding for literally the entire game. So, you know, we're just gonna save up and we're gonna head out of this dungeon. I picked up that weird-looking cube stone that was above that, the Levy Stone. That's what we need in order to get the airship. That's kind of the reason we came here for. Most runners of this game have at least forgotten to pick that up once and have lost a run to it. I remember this one time I was doing a lockout bingo between... it was a team lockout bingo, me and somebody else, and then I get versus 2 other runners, and the other runner in my team actually forgot that. He got to the desert where you would normally unlock it. He's like, oh crap, I forgot the Levy Stone. We still ended up winning, which is kind of weird because that instantly lost us like 7 minutes. But, you know, it happens. It's not one of the most notorious things to forget, but there's little things like that over the entire run that you can forget. And where many a run has died. Regardless, with that, we're going to be heading back to our ship, and we're going to unlock the airship. Now, with the airship, we're going to head for the Citadel of Trials, which is the next dungeon. And it's actually faster to move there by ship, but you lose a little bit more time on overworld movement later. The reason that we still use the airship, Double Drop has done a lot of testing on that. He did like 100 testing attempts to see what was actually faster. It turned out the ship is on average faster by about a second, but you lose about 8 seconds or something on overworld movement, or 9 seconds. I don't quote me on the exact numbers there, but you lose a little bit more on overworld movement, because of which this still ends up being the faster route. The tutorial of this game, there's actually, during the first tournament, me and Chrono Kirby made a tutorial of the game, and that actually still contains the ship route. That was one of the route changes that got added just after that we had made it. It was and we actually specifically mentioned to go there by the ship because that's faster, and it ended up being slower. After all, it's kind of a neat little thing that happens there. But yeah, this is where you can see how fast this airship is and why we want to use that. On top of which, the airship doesn't have any overworld encounter, or doesn't have any encounters. Really nice. I'm gonna make a safety save here for one encounter that you never actually die to, except it happened to Lenafest last year during the semifinals of the tournament. I've not actually died there once myself. I've gotten close. There have been, I believe, 3 recorded cases of this segment actually killing you. Basically, there's an encounter, the Sandworm. It's a pretty rare encounter that has a move called Earthquake, which instantly can kill a character, and it's an AoE spell. First of all, they have to actually do it, which they don't usually get off. Then they have to actually hit every single party member, which is about a 50% per party member. It's really rare to actually kill you, but it can happen, and it would set me back into Cavern of Ice. During the race that I was talking about, it was actually a semi-final race between me and Lenafes, and he ended up losing the race on that. He was set back, I believe, all the way to Lich or something, or to the start of Cavern of Ice. He lost a lot of time to it. It can be really bad like that. That guy I just talked to, in the NES version of the game, you actually have to show him the crown. For all other versions, they figure, but the crown is a required item earlier on anyway, so we're just going to assume you have that. Also, as with any good game, there is a teleporter maze. Every good RPG has at least one teleporter maze, right? Even the Pokemon series has them in one of the gyms. And, you know, Final Fantasy 1 is no exception. We're going to go through our teleporter maze, and as a little note on which teleporter to take, it's actually really easy to remember in that it's always the lower teleporter, no matter which one you try to take. So you just have to take the lower teleporter and your roll is in the correct one. So we get some Horned Devils here. Horned Devils are kind of annoying encounters. The fire spell does a lot of damage because we don't really have any magic resistance. We still don't up to this point. We're going to be getting that, but not anytime soon. So this encounter is the Nightmare, and this is actually kind of a nightmare of an encounter. Sorry for the pun there. Kind of a mandatory pun here. But yeah, this encounter is really, really tedious to run from. We have to fight him twice because that is a spike tile. We get the healing staff, which seems like a really bad piece of equipment, except that is the very reason we're here. It actually does, it saves more time than anything else here, because the healing staff allows me to, or can be glitched into the Lordly Robes, which grants a plus 20 on intelligence, which makes the White Mage heal a lot more. So much so that level 18 will suffice rather than level 33. That item alone saves 6 minutes. So we get the Rat's Tail, and then we're going to get into this Dragon Zombie encounter. He has a very small chance of dropping a Mega Elixir, which would be a nice safety item for the final boss. We don't get it, unfortunately. I will have to kill something along the way, because I do not actually have enough levels right now. I need my characters to be on level 19, which they aren't. Normally you level from the Dragon Zombie fight, but for some reason I didn't, so I'll be killing some stuff along the way. I should be very, very close to the level up. But if I don't have that level by the time I hit the airship, that's kind of a problem, so... Okay, there is the level up, so we have it now. I was literally that one encounter away. Normally, the leveling, or the experience that I would have gotten would have been enough, but I got unlucky in that both of the Nightmares were one encounter, as well as the Dragon Zombie, and I probably killed one Evil Eye too few as well, so just really a combination of factors that ended up making it that it wasn't enough. Luckily, we caught it in time. It happens somewhat regularly that you end up in the magic spell, and then suddenly you just can't buy the spell because you're not of an appropriate level. And that can lose quite a bit of time. So luckily we caught it in time. We're going to go over here, this little cave over here that seems really weird. These are the dragon caves, or at least one of them. This is where we find the god of the dragons, Bahamut, and he is going to grant us the class change. Now in the Citadel of Trials, I picked up the Rat's Tail, which is an item... from a story perspective, it's an item, it shows you the thing you expect to get. Why they expect to get a Rat's Tail, I have no clue, but that's kind of how the game explains it. Anyway, that is our proof of, you know, completing the trials, and when we show that to Bahamut, he knows that we've completed it, so we get ourselves a class change. My warrior is now a knight, which means I can learn some white magic. My thief becomes a ninja, which means a lot more equipment on my ninja. A ninja can equip significantly more pieces of equipment, really useful. And can actually learn some black magic as well. But the main thing here is that my black mage turned into a black wizard, which means I can actually learn the spell teleport, which is a really useful spell, as you'll see quite soon. We're gonna go take a quick stop in one of the towns we've already visited. We'll be visiting this town 3 times over the course of the run. This is gonna be the 2nd time, the town of Melmond, and this time it's just to buy some spells. We're gonna get a white magic spell, Hilara, and a black magic spell, teleport. And we're just gonna head out. That's all we were there for. And, well, we're gonna pay the elves a little visit again as well, because there is another spell in the Elven town that I also would like to get. Is this the last visit we'll pay to the elves? After this, we'll not actually see these guys anymore. And after that, I mean, we're 53 minutes in. I still only have 1 of the 4 crystals, so I guess I should get a move on that. So, I feel like it's about time we got ourselves a 2nd crystal. Let's go do that crystal that we could have done earlier, the Crystal of Fire. Gonna get my MP up real quick. Gonna start using a healing spell, get my health up, and we're gonna move over to Mount Gulg. Now, on average, in this dungeon, you'll get either like 1 or 2 encounters. Generally, you don't really get a lot. Sphinxes is like one of the worst things to get, so a little unfortunate right off the bat. You might notice over the course of this dungeon that I'm taking a lot of hits here. I'm walking on the lava a lot more than you might expect I would. The reason for that being that lava tiles do not actually spawn any encounters, so as such, the more lava I walk on, the fewer encounters I'll see. Every step I take there will give me 1 damage, but it will never go below 1 HP, so I can't actually die just on that. 3 encounters already. This is somewhat unlucky, and the Fire Hydra using Blaze, this is actually bad. That's why that is bad. We're just kill this thing. That is kind of like worst case scenario right there. I guess I'll start healing up here. Normally I heal a little bit further in, but normally you don't get a Fire Hydra blazing you this early. I'll take an extra heal menu. This is normally where I heal. That should give me enough health to reach the end of the dungeon. That's a bit of an unfortunate encounter. I took 1 misstep because of being 1 tile too far to the left. Because of that, I actually ended up being punished right away by this game. This is kind of how this dungeon works. There's a lot of precise movement, and any misstep that you make can end up losing you quite a bit of time. It was only 1 misstep that I really made, but that 1 misstep ended up still costing me a significant bit. But with that, we get to Merilith, or Carrie in the NES version, which is the second really big bad boss of the game. Really dangerous boss, I guess, except you'll see. So yeah, that was Merilith, the second really big bad guy in the game. In theory, you can actually one-shot this boss in the old bosses category. It's only happened to me once, but Merilith has 1410 health, and if the thief or the ninja goes first in all bosses, because he's a little bit higher level there, and you have 2 thieves, so it's a little bit more likely to happen. But if the thief goes first, and he gets a critical, and he gets a high roll, he can actually one-shot that boss. I'm not sure if I got that in my current world record run of the old bosses category or in one of the other runs that I did, but I have once gotten the one-shot on that thing in a run. Really cool when that happens. It saves virtually no time at all. It saves about 1.5 seconds. It's just really nice when it happens. We see the second of the bonus dungeons unlock, and with that we're heading out of Mount Gulg. And, well, it's time to start looking for the 3rd crystal. We've basically got all of our side questing out of the way. We're just going to focus on what we actually need to do, being getting the remaining 2 crystals. It turns out, though, that the next crystal, the water crystal, is in an underwater temple. And, you know, I can't really breathe underwater. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like that's kind of hard to do. So we need to get the Oxyil, which will allow us to do that. In order to do that, I'm going to get the fairy's bottle here. There's the fairy they're selling, and that fairy will grant me the Oxyil if I free her. I also get the Giant's Tonics, which is an item that will, for 1 fight, increase my max HP by 200, which adds a lot of safety for the final boss fight, which is why I bought a few of those. We're going into Gaia, and we see the fairy immediately pop out of our bottle. In both the NES and PSX version, you have to actually release the fairy manually. For PSP and GBA, we don't need to do that. It just unlocks there as soon as we enter town. We go all the way around town, and we're going to get ourselves that Oxyil. So here we go. Now, the exit of town is actually very close to my right here, but I am not going to be using it. Instead, I'm going to use the Black Mage to teleport out of town. It's about the same time. The time difference is negligible at best. But the reason we want to teleport here is because it sets up our menu for later on, because we actually have to use teleport a few times in the next dungeon as well. And now my cursor is already on it, and because of that, it still ends up saving time. So yeah, let's go into the next dungeon, the Sunken Shrine, which, by the way, is most runners' least favorite dungeon, but it's my personal favorite. The music in this dungeon is so good. I can strongly recommend listening to that. So I hope that'll be properly hearable on stream. We're gonna get to this mermaid, which is actually a ghost of a mermaid who asks us to save the mermaids from the Kraken, who's been causing some bad times right here. So we get into this barrel because somehow 4 people can fit into that barrel, and we go under the water. We can skip the cutscene there. There is a cutscene there, but you know, because it's PSP, we skip it. I'm not immediately going to go for the Kraken. Instead, I'm going to take a quick detour to get the Rosetta Stone, which is an item I need in order to be able to get into the Flying Fortress later on. So this dungeon is mostly known for the amount of unrunnables here. This dungeon has the most unrunnables of any dungeon in the game. There is the Sahagan Prince in Chief. Definitely the one we don't want to see. Really bad encounter, honestly. They come in packs of 9. They can be fed. This is the one. There we go. Speak of the devil. But yeah, slow encounter to deal with. There is the ghosts, and there are the water elementals. Water elementals can actually be run from, but only if they're tied with a water naga, which is why I could run from it earlier. So luckily, you know, they're not all that bad. In a newer route of this game, which is still kind of in development, which is why I'm not running it here yet, we'd actually get a couple of pieces of equipment over the course of the run, so that if we get an unrunnable here, we wouldn't have the Judgment Staff. Instead of that, I'm just hoping to just not get any unrunnables, because that's just faster to begin with. But if I do end up getting them, I end up losing time. I believe it's about equal if you get, depending on your menuing, two unrunnables. So at this point, it's already equal. If I get another unrunnable, I'll end up losing a little bit of time to it. Again, they're just mere seconds at most. The 5th floor, actually a floor without any encounters, where we can just enjoy that music a little bit. And that we get the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is an item that, story-wise, tells you that basically having that, you can learn any language that you want. For general, you know, really solid runs, we say, you know, around the 1 hour mark, you're on a sub 130 pace, and possibly world record contending. For any marathon run, I'll be happy if I get under 103, and I got significantly under that. If we can keep up this pace, there is still a lot to go, and there is still a lot that can happen, but if we can keep up this pace, I can fairly safely say we're around like a 130, 131 kind of pace right now. So we're on pretty good pace right now. Unfortunately, the Sunken Shrine is not treating me all that well. It's giving me a lot of encounters. It happens. It's honestly one of the things that you kind of expect with this dungeon. The best known legitimate run, I should say, has one encounter between the Rosetta Stone and the Kraken. That was a run from Double Drop, which is not theoretically impossible, but is incredibly rare to happen. He's had that happen once in an actual run. He saved like minutes just on this dungeon. So far, we've seen quite a few encounters, but the quality of them has been pretty good. I'm gonna go pick up another piece of equipment here, which is the light axe. It's one of the last items that I'm gonna be getting, and it's also gonna get me into the biggest equipment menu in the entire game. You'll notice I'm going to be picking up the chest from the right, and that's because both the left and down tile both have a spiked encounter on it. So this just saves me an encounter. And we're going to be using that to get some survival vests, which grants me even more agility. So yeah, I'm going to focus on this menu for a little bit, because this can be kind of tedious. And he's switching the mages, because I'm actually going to be equipping my white mage a little bit differently. She gets 2 lordly robes in order to get that magic boost. So every survival vest grants me a plus 15 on agility, meaning that effectively, because of my equipment, I now have plus 45 agility on every character except for my white mage, which just makes running a lot more doable. My white mage, though be it a thing that she does not have that, she does have the 2 lordly robes, which gets a plus 20 on intelligence, which ups her running chances by about as much. It just means that she's usually going to be slower than enemies. The reason I want that piece of equipment specifically is because there are some enemy combinations that I can only kill with a Judgment Staff using the white mage and no other character. Only the white mage with 2 lordly robes will actually one-shot it. So it ends up saving a little bit of time. I needed to get those on anyway, because we need them on for the final boss. So it ends up working out nicely. So with that, we're coming up on the third really big bad boss of the game, the Kraken, which is the guardian, or the elemental fiend of the water crystal. So let's see what he has to say. Let's see if he's actually going to be posing a challenge today. We now, by the way, all of those survival vests you also get from versions of Chronodia. Lordly robes, you need like the 3rd strongest version of Chronodia. Survival vest is a little bit better, but like you really like these are. That was the Kraken, by the way. Really hard boss fight. But yeah, all of the equipment I have is basically post-game equipment, and I'm using it on just regular bosses, which is why this becomes so easy. We get another one of the bonus dungeons unlocked. I guess I should actually say a little bit about these bonus dungeons, because these are really cool for both casual play and for the old bosses run. In old bosses, we actually go through all of them, because every single one of the bonus dungeons has some of the bosses from other Final Fantasy games, with the exception of the Labyrinth of Time, which is a PSP only one. But all 4 of the bonus dungeons you see unlocked have bosses from other Final Fantasies, respectively Final Fantasies 3, 4, 5, and 6. The one you see right now has Final Fantasy 5 bosses in it. Not to mention, the dungeons actually, and this is why they become really hard for a speedrun. For example, the one you just saw it being unlocked, the Lifespring Grotto, is 20 floors, and with the exception of 3, they're all in a random order. So you know, it's a pretty tricky dungeon, because the floors are all in a random order, so you don't really you can't just muscle memory through it. On top of that, most floors have random spawn points as well, so you'll need to instantly recognize which floor you're on, where on that floor you are, and how to get to the next one. And this is where those bonus dungeons are really challenging for new runners. So we get to the Waterfall Cave. This is the cave with the highest encounter rate of any of the dungeons that we're going to be visiting. I believe it's on par with the Mirage Tower, which is the dungeon after this. We're going to be getting the Warp Cube here. It's not all that special an item, really, but it is an item we need in order to get into the next dungeon with the Air Crystal, the Flying Fortress. Basically, you know, the Flying Fortress is, well, a flying dungeon, and generally humans don't do well getting into flying dungeons. How the dungeon stays afloat, I'll leave at that, but it's still a thing. In order to get there, we need to go to the Mirage Tower, and if we use the Warp Cube on top of the Mirage Tower, that will warp us into the bottom part of the Flying Fortress. The Mirage Tower itself is being blocked off. You can only get in there with the Chime, which we get from the people of Lufenia. For which I needed that Rosetta Stone I mentioned earlier. I took that safety save, by the way, because A, it's been a good while since I saved, and B, this encounter is a thing. Gaze is an instant death move. And you know, an ambush like that can be quite bad. There's also a 1 in 64 encounter here, the Green Dragon, which is poison gas, which I do not have any protection from because it's a magic spell. So that too could potentially become an issue. Okay, that should be one of the last encounters. We are going to be seeing an encounter on this tile. This is always going to be cockatrices and pyralisks. We see a lot of treasures. I'm only going to be picking up this one, the ribbon, and we're going to get to this guy. This guy has the best line in the game, by the way. Just wait for it. So yeah, here we go. This next line is fantastic. Buzzword, best line in the game. There we go. So we're going to use the ribbons to glitch it into a Gigantaxe, and we're going to glitch those ribbons onto my shield slot. The ribbon actually corresponds with an existing animation, so I can just equip it on the shield and be fine. There we go. Now, the ribbon is an item that, first of all, it blocks every single status effect in the game. Making it incredibly useful because, you know, we can't get petrified anymore. Except for Mind Flyers, nothing can do an instant death move on us anymore. They'll all just miss, and that's really, really convenient for us. Now, on top of that, it also grants us a 50% resistance against every single elemental damage in the game. So against all elemental spells. Which is very useful because a lot of the next couple of encounters have elemental moves, which, you know, we just won't take as much damage. There are 4 ribbons in the game, and every single character can equip it. Doesn't matter what class you are. It grants virtually no physical defense, but, you know, that kind of gets compensated because of that magic defense. However, one of the 4 ribbons is in one of the bonus dungeons, so it's really out of the way. This one is the most convenient to get. There is another one you can get in the Sunken Shrine, which is a little bit slower, but a little bit safer as well, because you get it earlier. There are a few runners that tend to do that for races. Most of them will just pick up the one that I just picked up. And by glitching that into a weapon and then back into the ribbons, we get more than enough. So we're going to be moving on to Lufenia. That's the town we just flew over, by the way. This is the longest bit of overworld overworld walking in terms of, you know, just general movement for just the walk. It's also basically all forest, so the encounter rate here is really high. And there is the unrunnable Minotaur zombies and trolls, and they can, well, quite literally troll you. So, yeah, we're just going to be killing them off if we happen to see them. We hope to just not see them, though. At the end of the day, that would be the ideal situation. I've had quite a few runs where you either get like 1 or 2 encounters here, which can also happen. Which is really convenient because you end up saving quite a bit of time because of that. If you happen to get that, it's just questionable whether you will actually get lucky and just get good encounters, get lucky on the encounters. We'll see how it works out. We end up in Lufenia, and this town is known as NPC Hell. There's 2 NPCs that can just get into your way. Neither of them actually trolled me that much. Before we had teleport, we actually had to walk out, so you'd have to pass them twice. Now we just teleport out. So, yeah, we got lucky on the NPC RNG. We get the chime, and with that, we're going to move over to the Mirage Tower, where we're going to be making our way to the Flying Fortress, and with that, the 4th and last of the 4 crystals.
Maybe we have time for a quick donation?
Yep, go ahead.
Gael donated 10 bucks and says, "Don't let the great FF1 run fool you. FF1 Fenicom isn't a good run."
Now, I knowing both FF1 and FF3, I'm going to get a little bit of bias in here. FF1 as Super Famicom really is, FF1 Famicom is really not the better run of the two. You really should be putting your money to FF3. And I'm saying that as an FF1 runner, so I guess. That's just my opinion, though. Feel free to donate for whichever one you prefer, but if you want my opinion, I definitely put it to FF3. So yeah, on the note of that bid war, what are we currently at anyway?
we are currently Final Fantasy has 11 bucks and Final Fantasy 3 has 25 bucks. So if you want to troll them, just get your donations in to get Final Fantasy ahead again.
So, the Mirage Tower, this actually, the vampire here is kind of a weird encounter. The way that the game works, the vampire isn't unrunnable, but only if there is exactly one of them. Now, on every single version after the NES version, that can only happen in that mini-boss that we fought earlier. But it's still in the game's code. If you look in the code, you actually will find that one vampire in this dungeon is unrunnable, but one vampire just can't spawn, because of which we can always just run from it anyway. It's a bit of a weird encounter in that. On top of this tower, this is the 3rd floor. We actually got through that pretty well so far. And just as I say that, we get a 9 encounter ambush. Never you mind. In a little bit, we'll be fighting the Blue Dragon, which is another one of those mini-bosses. He's a fairly easy encounter. We don't really have to worry about him. We'll just one-shot him, after which we can get into the Flying Fortress. And then it's about time. We're going to be heading into the last stretch of the game. Once we get to the Flying Fortress itself is a pretty short dungeon. We'll get through that pretty quickly as well. And once we have gone through it, it's just the final dungeon left. Now, the final dungeon is a long dungeon. On average, it takes about 11 minutes to get through it. We'll be doing 6 boss fights as we go through that dungeon, so it's a very long boss rush at the end there. But by that point, we are getting close to the end. Our good boy Evil Eye, which we grinded on earlier, he's gonna say hi again. He's actually become a random encounter in this dungeon. We don't really mind if he shows up here. He's a pretty quick to kill encounter. There are far worse things in this place. The Flying Fortress consists of 5 floors, and really after like most of these floors are really short. Only like 2 and 4 are kind of long. There's also a lot of items to get here. Like this floor, for example, it's shaped like an 8-sided like a star kind of thing. And every single side, except for the top and the bottom one, have chests that you can loot for treasure and money. And it basically sets you up for that last dungeon. In this place, you can also get the Adamantite, which you can use in order to get Excalibur, which is one of the strongest swords in the game. You've got pieces of armor for all of the mages as well. The 3rd of the ribbons that you can get in the game is in this place. It's in one of those. And there's lots and lots of money just casually really worth it to grind out. Now, I will say we're about to come up on the 5th floor, which has the most hype encounter in the game. It's very unlikely we'll see it, but if we happen to see it, I want you all to spam Warmech in chat. The Warmech is a 1 in 64 encounter. It's the highest experience and money-yielding encounter in the game, giving 32,000 experience. It's also really dangerous, which is why I saved for it. I have only gotten it once in a run, which happens to be my All Bosses run, or my Full Bestiary run, so I actually got it on a very convenient run as well. Nicky Noel, who is actually the world record holder for Full Bestiary GBA, actually got it as the first encounter on this floor. Unfortunately, we did not seem to get it again. It's about like once every 32 runs or so that it happens, so it's incredibly rare. Over the entire tournament, the finals for the tournament were on last Wednesday, and during the entire tournament, we've seen 1 match where we saw the Warmech show up in a run. So that just goes to show how incredibly rare it is. But that's Tiamat down, the last of the crystals unlocked. We're going to get the light of the air crystal, and with that, we are basically good to go to the last of the dungeons. Now, in a little bit, we'll be heading back to one of the dungeons you may recognize if you've been here for, I want to say, roughly like an hour and 15 minutes. We were there before, because it's actually the first dungeon of the game. Right in that dungeon where we fought Garland and saved the princess at the start, we're going to be unlocking a time portal. We're going to be traveling 2,000 years into the past, where Garland has actually set up a time loop where he sent the 4 fiends into the future to try and block our path. And he is going to take the shape of Chaos. He's really powerful in this timeline. And that's where we're going to have to break... By killing him, we're going to have to break the time loop in order to actually bring the world back to peace. So a bit of a weird airship movement. God, I was like 3 tiles too far down. That's still pretty close, though. We're going to get the last of the bonus dungeons unlocked. This is the Labyrinth of Time, which is a PSP-only bonus dungeon. And by the way, this is the only bonus dungeon that actually has a separate category in it. Because it actually... the entire dungeon revolves around going fast. Every single puzzle you have to set away certain skills, and that will grant you more time to solve the puzzle. World record on that is like under 20 minutes at this point. It's really, really fast. And that's usually where most old bosses runners and their first runs lose the most time to world record. I remember Lenofis, the first old bosses run he actually did and completed. He lost about an hour just on that dungeon to compare to my runs. Anyway, with that, it's into Chaos' Shrine. I'm gonna say I did the safety save there because there are a lot of things that are really dangerous, specifically these white dragons, which we've seen before. Not as dangerous anymore, but they can still really troll me. There are a lot of unrunnables over the course of this dungeon as well. First, we're going to have to make our way up here and into the 3rd floor, where we're going to be fighting the first boss. Now, this boss actually is one of I believe the boss with the least amount of health, but he has an incredibly high defense, because of which, casually, he can be a little bit tricky. He grants 1 experience and 1 gil as a reward, so he grants me absolutely nothing. And it's, like, it's a pretty cool boss, even though he's kind of, like, just... He's probably the weakest and the easiest out of all of this. Because of having the Barbarian Sword, we're guaranteed to... Because the Barbarian Sword ignores a lot of those defenses. So we'll be guaranteed to one-shot this thing. So yeah, this is the Death Eye, the first boss of the game. Or the first boss of this dungeon. And yeah, that's him out of the way. Unfortunately got another encounter. We didn't see any green dragons, which is kind of nice. This is also the point where I really have to look at my my health. By the way, you may remember about 3 minutes into the game I said that we got the loot and that we would eventually use that, but it would be a while. And around the 120 mark, well, this is where we use it. So there you guys go. And with that, it's down through Chaos' Shrine. There's 2 more difficult and really painful floors we have to go through. Once we've gotten through these 2 floors, we're basically in the clear. This encounter is one of those encounters that I mentioned. This is the one encounter in this floor, that I can only kill or only get a guaranteed one-shot on if I use the Judgment Staff by the White Mage. If the Black Mage, if the Warrior and Thief will not kill any of the Ice Kick assists, on the Black Mage they're a range, and they usually will not both die. That's, by the way, also the one encounter we ideally don't want to see here, but it's quite common that you still get some of them. So we're back on the 1st floor. This is actually the floor where we entered the dungeon, but then we entered on the bottom part of it. Nice preemptive on these white dragons. Now, as I enter the next floor, the enemies will actually suddenly get a lot weaker. The enemies on these next few floors are supposed to be representing the enemies that we found in the earlier dungeons. As such, even though the combination, or they usually throw the rarer and more difficult stuff at me, they're not actually that difficult. Earth Elementals is the one unrunnable here. This dungeon, or this floor specifically, also still has the Earth Medusas, which is actually from a bit of a later dungeon, from the Citadel of Trials. But that's because otherwise it would really become too easy, this floor. And with that, at the end of each of the floors that we're going to be going into right now, every single one of them, we will find another boss fight. So every floor has a boss coming up. Always pretty much like a tile that I have to pass, usually close to the stairs. Now, you may remember that at the start of the game, the Lich was actually, I said that was the most deadly boss of the game. Well, there is another Lich fight, and the Lich is still the most deadly fight in this dungeon as well. On this health, he shouldn't be able to kill me, but he has a really powerful move, Flare. We hopefully will not be seeing it. Because that spell that I've been using with the Judgment Staff, yeah, the enemy now has that too. He did not get it off. It's actually arranged to kill him in one turn. You do not always get that. And if he can easily outspeed one of the party members. So we got very lucky there. Got him in one go. And with that, we're going to move on to B2, which is the fire dungeon. And you start seeing that immediately. We see the enemies that we fought, or that we could have encountered earlier in the fire dungeon as well. They are, again, the more powerful stuff. Because Gulk, you're supposed to do that, like, as the second crystal dungeon. It's not supposed to be very difficult. So they throw the most powerful enemies of that dungeon in here, but at the end of the day, there's still enemies that we could have fought like an hour ago already, pretty much. This floor is getting pretty bad. Generally, you get like 2 to 3 encounters. We're already over that. I've gotten this floor without any encounters at all, at which point I believe it's a 56-second floor, including the entire boss fight, which is Merilith. From here, you'll actually start seeing that bosses start becoming a little bit more difficult. Not that much more difficult, but difficult enough that I won't actually kill them in one turn anymore. I guess this also kind of goes to show how dangerous or how strong these weapons are that we have, because we're in the last dungeon of the game. There's 3 bosses left until the very end, and it's only now that we're not one-turning every single boss. So next floor is actually, I've gotten this floor encounterless twice. Once in a marathon at PSG, I want to say 5 or 6. Which is the Benelux Speedrunner Gathering, where I ran this as well. That's where I got it encounterless, and once in a PB attempt or a race or something. There's 2 types of encounters in this floor. There's the water elementals, which are unrunnable, and there are just other enemies that you can easily run from. There are Sahagin Princes, but because they're not tied with Sahagin Chiefs, they are just runnable. You don't have to worry about them. But really, it's the water elementals that we don't want to see. 3 water elementals is worse than average. In the new route, again, you get Blazara for these, and they die a little bit faster. At the end of the day, though, I'm just banking on not getting them to begin with, because you can just not get them, and that will work better. I got a bit of a level up there. I'm getting really unlucky with my HP rolls on the Black Mage, by the way. On every level up in Final Fantasy I, and this is also only the PSP version, you either get a max roll on the stat increase or a minimum roll. And I've gotten a lot of minimum rolls on my Black Mage. My Ninja, on the other hand, which is the other character that's usually on the close end, is actually really, really high on health. Generally, my cutoff for being, not needing the Giant Tonics is 275 on the Black Mage, which is well above, or 275 on the Ninja, sorry, which is well above, and 250 on the Black Mage, which is well under. So it's going to be an interesting final boss fight, that's for sure. So that's the Kraken fight down. Gonna heal up, because this is actually the first boss in the game where I'm not just going to be attacking. We're about to head into Tiamat 2, and Tiamat 2 is not a guaranteed 2-turn fight. It's one of the harder bosses in that. You can two-turn this fight with just attacking. It's about a 50% roughly. However, if I use haste with the Black Mage on my ninja, that chance increases from about a 50% to about a 95%. He gets the haste off, so it's a guaranteed two-turn. That's actually the perfect scenario for this fight. Getting haste before anything else is ideally what you want to have happen here. Got a couple of pretty low rolls, but it should easily be the one turn. Basically, what haste does is it in FF1, because it doesn't have the way that, or the bar that fills up like in the other Final Fantasy. So instead, it increases the amount of hits you do. Basically increases the amount of, or basically doubles the amount of damage that I do with a character, making it incredibly overpowered. This is also, like, the Thief may have seemed a bit of a weird class choice, but that's all just, like, the Thief deals, if not limited to equipment, the most amount of damage. So we're gonna save up. Last bit of equipment glitch, or last bit of equipping there. I equipped the clothes on the White Mage to guarantee that she's going to be slower than Chaos. The Golden Staff in order to make sure that she heals just a little bit more. And with that, we're going to be going into the final boss fight of the game. Probably going to end around a 132, I want to say, depending on this fight goes. This fight can actually still kill me, by the way. We are not in the clear until about turn 3 of this fight. So let's see how it goes. We're going to be using the Giant's Tonics. There they are. I'm going to be using them a little bit differently than I normally would. I'm not going to be doing it on the White Mage. Normally you do Thief and Black Mage, but my White Mage is kind of low-ish, and my Ninja is actually really high. So, taking that as a safety. Hopefully my Black Mage will tank this, otherwise it's going to lose a lot of time. Ooh, clutching on 13 health there, really solid though. We get the first haste off. Basically, I'm going to get haste on every single party member except my White Mage, and then it's just attacking. This guy has got 20,000 health. He can do a variety of physical attacks, spells, status effects, just about everything you can think of. Blaze into Tsunami is the worst combination possible. My Black Mage might die here. Blaze, Tsunami, Cyclone under 3 really powerful spells. I got a double haste off, so I'm not going to be reviving him. That will lose me some time, and this could still be dangerous. If he does Cyclone now, we might be in trouble. He does not go for the Cyclone, goes for the physical hit on the Ninja. Not ideal, but it works. I should be in the clear right now, so get ready on the timer. Guys, time is, by the way, when this guy flashes white. Guys, thank you for joining me on FF1. Enjoy the final fight. This move, by the way, longest animation of all his attacks. Lazaga is actually on a different magic cycle than the other 3 spells. He's got 2 cycles he can go through. Starting to run out of MP, which is a little bit worrisome. Time. So yeah, that was Final Fantasy 1 any % for the PlayStation Portable. Now, I want to give a couple people a quick shout out. First of all, the entire crew from ESA Germany, of course, for, you know, setting up the marathon, having me run Final Fantasy 1. I want to thank everybody in the Final Fantasy 1 community. I mean, a couple of the names have already been on screen. Chrono Kirby, who's done a lot of routing on this game. Double Drop, short-time world record holder, but also major router on this game. Nikki Noel, world record holder on more categories than anybody else right now. having routed a lot of GBA, but also starting to route PSP. That she's actually the cause of a lot of route changes now. Leonis, who's played quite a role as well. Just a lot of really cool people. Be sure to check all of those people out. I want to thank my boys from the BSG community real quick for, you know, convincing me to actually run here. Two of them, which will be showing up later on in the marathon, Rekild and Nextera, who are going to be, who actually got here with me. But, you know, that was a big part in for me at least, in actually pushing me over the edge, so to speak, to actually go to ESA Germany. And of course, everybody in chat, because how could we forget anybody, any one of you? Thank you guys for joining me on this run. Are we already ready for the next run? I'm not sure how well we're doing on schedule and whatnot, but if we're all good, then I'd like to give it over for hopefully, if you ask me, Final Fantasy 3, if not Final Fantasy 1. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the marathon, and I may be back on Sunday with some Quirk as a backup, so we'll see. Enjoy.